Okay, welcome to day 4 of the Summer Sleep Challenge with Coach Vic, the 2023 edition. How is everybody this morning? Checking things off your checklist, doing your morning routines. Did you do some of your evening routine last night? I'd really love to hear how you're doing, even if it means you're going to absorb this content this week and then apply it, next week. But just remember what I talked about yesterday in the kernel. Before I do, though, I want to express some gratitude for being able to present this content to you. I'm grateful for the help I have gotten from people in my life when I've needed it, even including now. I think we always, it's the good to give and accept receiving. The universe always brings us what we need, I believe. And I think most of all, well, actually not most of all really, but I am super grateful for my puppies being so quiet in the kitchen there. I have the door closed, but sometimes any little noise, my little Jack Russell Chihuahua mix, Sita, sets her off. I mean, it has to be a real challenge for Bullet, and sometimes then that sets her off and she doesn't realize the challenge is gone. But anyhow, they've been wonderful and I'm super grateful for that. Let's see if it holds. Okay, so wanted to remind you too, besides the questions, that when you get your replays, when you get the reminder emails about this morning, the morning lessons and the link for the Zoom link, all of those things you could click and the links within the email, including opening the email, gives you points. And tomorrow I'm going to see who's had the most points. That means what that tells me is that you're interacting with this challenge, even if you're not live, although that would be a little subjective addition to points if there were people live. And it doesn't hurt my feelings when I don't have live participants, because this content will live in the sleep challenge for as long as I want it to live. Likewise, I have these recordings. I can share them at any time with a client who, for this particular content for today, might need that information. So it's always good. And so just one little thing about yesterday when I talked about the kernel and the making the bed, and by the way, who made their bed? I did put a little post in the sleep challenge Facebook group of the things I did, but I forgot to say I made my bed. I do that pretty much every day. It just makes me feel organized. It starts my day off right. And when I can't do it, I forgive myself because my schedule's busy. I've got to get out the door, that kind of thing. But I had a comment about, having this routine and the order of things and making bed for this person was one of those things. But there was like this criteria for that. And like it had to come after this or that. And the point of talking about yesterday and the Change Your Habits, Change Your Lives masterclass I offer, which helps to change habits. Now that the fact that she gets all those things done is a good thing. That's not like a bad habit, but you could take that really good routine and like dice in a cup, roll it out and take it in a different order. And the point of me telling you and asking you to do that is that it will actually put you into your conscious brain and make you aware of what you're doing, put you back into that. We don't, think about the times you drive home from somewhere and you pull into your driveway and going, yeah, I don't really even remember how I got here. Because we're on autopilot, we can do that. That's something that our unconscious brain has the ability to do. But if we want to learn new things and apply new things, like everything I'm teaching you this week, you got to step out of that unconscious brain and retrain the conscious brain, if that makes sense. Okay, so a little bit quick review of yesterday. I'm going to show you a video as well before we get started with today's content. But the hormone dance. One of my favorite promos for this was the hormone dance one that I did with the music, because literally, really, if if you could have that song, that violin song, waltz song playing in your mind when you're thinking about applying these things, that, if especially if you're musically inclined, that actually, that's harmony. And that's what we're looking for here, harmony between these two hormones, which will ultimately also affect the entire body, hormones, nervous system, everything. So a reminder, and I did put a link in the email yesterday for that Cleveland Clinic article, and it's very much in layman's terms. It's easy to understand. Some of the published articles I read yesterday, those, PubMed and Frontiers, those get a little scientific-y, and you got to kind of decipher stuff. And but I didn't share that. Cleveland Clinic, that one's pretty good. You can read it if you can dive in and see if you're symptomatic to any of this stuff. But the top things that you want to think about with your cortisol is that it regulates the stress response in our body. Think about the primal man who literally, we didn't have all the stimulants we do when I talk about the EMFs and things like that, that also trigger our cortisol. The main thing was that they had to run away from danger. They expended energy for the kill, so they could eat. But there was always, they quickly came down out of that. We never stayed in a stress response for very long. That is what chronic stress is, and that is what creates damage to the body. So cortisol is good. We need it for regulating our stress response. So, and there are ways that, if you are in this chronic state, to get out of it: breath work, meditation, even some movement. Might have to be gentle movement if you're in a high rate of stress. Cortisol also regulates our metabolism. It regulates our blood pressure and our blood sugar. So just think about that primal man running away from the tiger. Insulin, our bodies functioned like they do today. Back then, that's the physiology, the biology of the human body. But if he's running from a tiger or running to chase for the kill, his pancreas is going to dump a bunch of insulin in order to, a bunch of cortisol so that he could go chase the tiger. When there is like a food type stress response where the blood sugar raises because you had a piece of candy, and you are not diabetic, you don't have insulin resistance. Even if you do, the pancreas is going to dump out that insulin to lower your blood sugar and bring you back into homeostasis. So I wore a continuous glucose monitor for a while, almost a year. I took a little period of time off last summer because it shows up on your arm, and actually it was kind of good. I try to do it seasonally because my diet could be a little different, my activity could be different. And that was real interesting to see exactly what pretty much, I don't have a blood sugar issue. I did it as kind of a lab rat, and to see how they work so that I can make the recommendation for clients. And I do recommend it, even if you don't have a even if you don't have a blood sugar issue. Maybe you're concerned because your mom or dad did. Again, DNA, not your destiny, but it's good to know. And those are easily, there's a lot of functional labs and functional tests and stuff that I do that the conventional docs don't do, but they could hook you up with a continuous glucose monitor. Consider that and see, because as we talk about nutrition today, food has a lot to do with our quality of sleep. So, and of course, cortisol also is involved in the sleep-wake cycle. It's 1/2 of it right there. So melatonin, let's take a quick look at this video. Okay.
Melatonin is a derivative of serotonin, best known for its role as a hormone. It is produced in a small endocrine gland in the brain called the pineal gland, as well as in the retina and a number of other organs and cells. The melatonin produced in the pineal gland, however, is thought to contribute most to circulating levels of melatonin in the bloodstream. Synthesis of melatonin in the pineal gland and resultant levels of melatonin in the bloodstream exhibit a clear circadian rhythm where they are highest at night. This nighttime melatonin production is stimulated by neural input from a structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which acts as a master circadian clock for the brain. Indeed, the best understood function of melatonin is its role in regulating circadian rhythms. Rising melatonin levels at night are associated with lower body temperature and blood pressure and an increase in tiredness. Melatonin production can be inhibited by exposure to blue wavelength light, which is part of the basis for advice to avoid using electronic devices close to bedtime. It is also thought that changes in melatonin levels can provide information about changes in night length, which may provide the brain with information about seasons. In some animals, this information may help to regulate seasonal changes in things like reproduction, hibernation, and migration. Melatonin is believed to have a number of other functions as well. It is thought, for example, to modulate immune system activity and to act as a free radical scavenger and antioxidant. Two G protein coupled melatonin receptors, MT.
That's the main thing I wanted you to hear. But also remember yesterday, and this is newer research, that I don't know when that video was, was filmed. They didn't talk at all about the melatonin in the gut and how it's 400 to 100 times more in the gut than in the pineal gland. So relating that now today to nutrition and what we're going to talk about, if you saw the little subject line that pistachios, and I mentioned it yesterday, are high in melatonin. So also one of the things they mentioned in there, about the light and the blood pressure, one of the things that cortisol also does is regulates blood pressure, but both hormones do. So that's a quick review. It's a little scientific, but if you, without even thinking about all that stuff, if you honor the morning and evening routines, go through your sleep prep checklist, and just do these things, your body will take care of it, because it's in our innate immune system to be able to regulate. They talked about in the video about the primal manner, our animals, how they understand the seasons. This all comes because of where the sun is in the sky, and that's harmony. And if we don't tune out the harmony, if we tune into the harmony and just let our bodies work with that, and those morning and evening routines are meant to help reset you that way, that's where it's going to be a beautiful dance for you. So we want a beautiful dance, right? Let's get back to this. So that always happens. There we go. All right. Today we are talking about nutrition and the sleep connection. And if you didn't think there was one, well, there is one. Okay, so yesterday when and the day before when I was showing you the bio battery, and it mentioned the 4 white devils on the bio drainer side. Let's just talk about those a little bit more. And I will tell you this, I'm very much on the platform of low to no grain diet. And you can know for sure, and grain, because every grain contains a gluten. Rice has a different gluten than wheat. Corn has a different gluten than wheat, but they all have gluten. Pseudo grains, when you're trying to get healthy and reduce the inflammation in your body, it's good. Or even the ancient grains, good to just avoid everything. And when you get healthier, you can try a rotation diet and try to reintroduce things. There is one way you can know for sure whether you have an issue, and that is a DNA test. DNA is the only way. I mean, you could do a food intolerance test, but that's either going to give you a snapshot of right now, and there could be other chemical things going on in your body at the time you take that test that could make the results be skewed a little bit. But your DNA don't lie. I actually have a course on that. Your DNA don't lie. When we test you for DNA, it's all health aspects, but one of them is gluten. Also how you process carbs, dairy. I mean, these things that we need to know, but it tells us whether or not we have the optimal or suboptimal gene or genome for that particular, for that food in this case. But sleep is even, there's sleep hormone, sleep genes that you can study and know whether or not you have the optimal, suboptimal, or what they call heterozygous. So what it is you get one gene from mom and one gene from dad, and put together, you could either have a combination that's optimal, a combination that's got one or the other, and one that's suboptimal. I have the suboptimal gene for gluten, and I started reducing grains or avoiding grains before I knew that, and I had great results. But I will tell you that even if you don't ever do the test, or you do and you have, you're the heterozygous or even have the optimal gene, you will do better, obviously. But there's so many other things we need to be concerned about with grains, how much they're sprayed with pesticides, glyphosate to bring them to harvest. And they just, in the evolution of man, 10,000 years ago, there were not grains. It came out of a drought that when man back then saw that animals were eating the grass and they plucked it out of the ground, and they saw grains are seeds of grass. So they somehow figured out to pulverize and make things out of those seeds of grass. And in the evolution of man, our bodies are not adapted to be able to eat that, digest it, and absorb nutrients from it. That is like numero uno, biggest thing. Then there is the fact that you have intolerances. They say 30% of the population. I say it's much, much greater. And most people are not going to want to give up their grains. So what this little talk about here is how to do alternative stuff. And if you like to cook, it's fun to experiment. And there is not a lot of things you can buy. Not that I promote buying things out of a box, but for one, for different breads and sweet treats and things like that, Simple Mills has great products for alternatives to flour, to grain flour. So the 4 white devils are the white flour, white grain flour, processed dairy, processed salt, your table salt that's made in the lab, basically. It's not Celtic salt, sea salt, Himalayan salt, and processed sugar. So nut flours are alternative flours, but also cassava flour, tiger nut is one, almond flour is the most common probably. You have cashew flour, there's many. You can just do some research, and they're abundantly on the shelves today. So raw dairy or nut milks are what I would recommend. But also when you're talking even raw dairy, you want to look for A2. It's very hard to find. I forget the name of the, anyway, A2 comes from a Jersey cow, and it's, hormonally speaking, the milk and the hormone of the cow and the milk they produce is much more like human hormones. So our bodies can assimilate that much, much better. But again, check and see if that, you could be lactose intolerant, that's the milk sugar, and that's in both cows. But when you are trying to get healthy, I get people off dairy completely. And most absolutely conventional dairy. So that's from an A1 cow. Now, The other thing is if you buy A1 raw dairy, much better because it's not processed. But when you process the milk, you're getting rid of all of the good enzymes that might help you digest it. So then it becomes a problem in the gut when they don't have the enzymes and the bacteria in there to help digest it. So pretty much just stay away from processed. I know if you go to a restaurant, you may not have a choice. If it's a nice restaurant, they're probably going to have a good salt on the table. Don't limit your salt. Just use the good salt. And then processed sugar. So alternatives for sugar stuff when you're baking or cooking is dates, figs, raw unprocessed processed honey or real maple syrup, stevia if you don't mind the taste of that. Make sure it's not in the powder form. Make sure it's liquid and from a good source, organic, always. So there you go with that. I dive much deeper into this when I work with a client and we talk about nutrition. So the big thing today in terms of the diet and how this could affect your sleep is the nutrition program I put my clients on, which is metabolic typing. My teacher, Paul Chek, has coined his own name for it. He calls it primal pattern, or it's like ancestral dieting. So you think about where you came. If you came from very northern states where the ground freezes over in the winter, you're not growing fruits and vegetables, and could you? Yes, you could have a greenhouse to do that. But ancestrally speaking, that may not be what your body needs. You need to probably more than likely be on a higher protein diet, and your body will be healthy for it. Okay. So, and likewise, then if you're south of the equator and you're in a warm climate where you can grow food, it's where you have to be concerned if you relocate from a polar state to a tropical state area of the world. It might sound wonderful, lots of sunlight and all that stuff, but it may not be healthy in terms of food. And you could still probably alter that by just making sure that you get more protein. So anyhow, I touched a little bit at the end of session yesterday on eyes and no eyes food. So let's talk about that first. Eyes food are protein sources from an animal, and eyes food are the only source of a complete protein. So if you're a vegetarian, a vegan, because vegetarians might eat fish, and they're getting a complete protein that way. Yes, you can combine, but depending on what your ancestry is, I've known a lot of unhealthy, maybe not vegans, they really are I shouldn't say that, health may be challenged, and maybe not initially. Let's say you become a vegetarian or a vegan coming off a highly processed diet. Well, you could end up getting really healthy initially, but 10 or 20 years of that might take a toll on your body in another way. Nutrient deficiencies for one. So, and not that you wouldn't have gotten the nutrient deficiencies from the processed food, you would have, but still there's something not right. So eyes food, you can only get a complete protein from an animal, and eyes food can include the foods that come from the animal, like eggs, for example, and I mentioned milk and that. So no eyes foods are carbohydrates. These are food sources from plants or nuts, but that's a plant. Anything that grows in the ground, grows on a tree, that is a carbohydrate. No eyes food should ideally come from a whole food source, example, whole fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And it should also come, or if it comes in the form of processed grain, that should be avoided if you are addressing inflammation or pain in your body, and like I just mentioned, that your DNA doesn't subscribe to that, like you have the suboptimal gene for gluten, or even carb. You don't process carbs well. So the no diet is eating right for your metabolic type. We have a protein type or a polar type. I just mentioned where in the world that would be. But this is, I'm going to show you plates in a second here. We have a carb type, equatorial type, that's south of the equator, and a mixed type or a variable type. And I would tell you that most people could start there without even answering the 14 questions I give you on the metabolic typing questionnaire and end up doing well. So let's take a look real quick here at some plates. First thing we're going to look at is what a protein type plate would look like. This is 60%, or I should say 65 to 90% of eyes food, meat, animal food, to 35 to 10% of no eyes food. It's as simple as that. And when I mentioned yesterday, fats, I'm not mentioning fats, but the 3 macronutrients are proteins, fats, and carbs. You got to include fat in this too. You're going to get a substantial amount in the meat. And if it's a lighter, leaner meat, that's where I mentioned yesterday, I will drizzle some olive oil on it, as well as maybe on the salad. Then we have the carb type, pretty much almost exactly opposite of what you see here. So, and when you are from a region of the world that's south of the equator, or this could be the person, well, if you type out like this, that's hopefully where you're from, South Pacific, anybody who lives in a tropical environment. But there should still always be protein included. And my recommendation and where I've sit, and I apologize for vegetarians and vegans out there, is I don't think we should be without animal proteins. Our physiology was designed to eat them. We are carnivorous. I get the reasons why people do it, and I will work with someone who has that belief system and wants to continue on that path, because we'll do it as wisely as we can, okay? And there's still health gains to be made working this way, even if you are vegetarian or vegan, okay? But also, I find that those people don't usually seek me out, so for help. And that's how the universe works, and I'm okay with that. And then finally, this is the 50-50 plate, obvious, right down the middle. Now, where I'll say that you can see, if you start here, this is great. And then what I give you, and this is going to be hard to read, but I give you a tachometer. This is a tachometer that gives you, if you eat too many carbs, what your symptoms are up here, too much protein, what your symptoms are down here, short-term symptoms, long-term symptoms. Long-term symptoms mean you're probably, if you are somewhere and needing help, you might already be presenting in a disease state. That's what long-term is. We talk about having a disease, cancer, autoimmune, and that bile battery. That didn't drain like overnight. That drained over 10, 20, 30 years. And some of that could have been because of your diet. And so if you can pay attention to what the symptoms are, if you don't eat enough protein, for example, for me, it's a headache. If you eat too much protein and enough carb, you might feel too heavy and full. Now, that's harder to correct, but if the headache, when I was first doing this and I was still eating dairy, I was eating cottage cheese, and I might have had coffee first thing with no protein, I got a headache. Almost first sip, I'd go get a little cottage cheese and my system was balanced. Now, I don't eat cottage cheese now. I don't do well. I do better without dairy. Let me just put it that way. Could I have a little cottage cheese every now and then? My body's healthy enough to tolerate it, but I don't desire it. So because it's not the healthiest thing for me, but bone broth might be the other thing, or a piece of chicken or something. So there you are with what a plate should look like. Now, why is this important for your sleep? If you're a protein type and you're eating even like a 50-50, but if you're eating like a carb type, there's going to be all kinds of problems. More than likely, one thing is glucose, blood sugar dysregulation, and a glucose problem. So that's the person where I mentioned early on, where you might want to have a little bit of protein before you go to bed. That can make a difference for someone who is a protein type who didn't get it right during the day, Or maybe is they're trying to dial back on their sleep, and we're looking at a lot of different things. That could be what keeps them asleep, among other things. So, and then on the opposite side of that, if you are more of a 50-50 or a carb type, you can stand, it takes longer. So the difference, let me dial back for just a second. There's a chemical reaction. It's how we oxidize the food when we put it in our mouth. If you're a protein type and you eat a lot of carb, even the very best carbs, the most fiber-rich carbs, you are going to blow through that food so fast. That's why it dysregulates your blood sugar. Versus adding some protein and fat to that, it balances out and enters the system, and you oxidize it at the proper rate. A carb type who eats too much protein, that's going to just sit in their stomach and almost putrefy a little bit if it's in excess of what they need for the carbs. And on the other hand, when they eat carbs, even the most fiber or even the less fibrous carbs, more like a fruit, they don't blow through that. They don't oxidize that food so fast. So that doesn't create a blood sugar dysregulation in most cases. And so we have to think about that when we're going to bed at night. What did I do today? What did I have for breakfast, or what did I not have for breakfast? That's affecting me right now going to sleep. And that's going to segue quickly here into a very brief conversation about intermittent fasting. So I would never have a client initially intermittent fast. I mean, beyond maybe 12 hours, unless they were moving along really fast. But it's something after we understand and learn, tap into the signals the body gives, and we make sure the blood sugar is regulated and all those things. I don't recommend any kind of extended fast. It's more important to get nutrition into the body, get good sleep. And there's so many benefits to fasting and intermittent fasting, and that can come along later, but it's not necessarily something you need to do right off the bat, if that makes sense. So for me, intermittent fasting for me, I mentioned the other morning, I think I was going to be on about a 17-hour fast. I average 14 to 16 hours when I stop eating, anywhere between 2 and 5 o'clock, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, actually 2, 3 is best for me because I like to have that 17-hour fast, and I like to have breakfast in the morning. I will do 24-hour fasts every now and then, especially if I've been off the wagon, so to speak, and the benefits from it are huge. We want to support dying off cells, and our body will regenerate new cells, so the die off is good. And for me, if I eat too close to bed, since I have established this intermittent fasting routine, I don't sleep as well. My body's still processing the food. It creates heat in my body, which it does. That's how we digest our food. So that's beneficial to me. And it works well with my schedule as well. So there we go. That puts a period on day 4, nutrition and the connection. And just understand, I was going to go back to really quickly, sorry, that if what we're doing, the reason why I don't recommend the fasting, and I want you to eat something an hour when you wake when I first start working with you, because that will set the blood sugar right for the day so that you can be ready for sleep, and sets all the cortisol, melatonin, all those things are going to work in harmony together. Later, when your body's healthier, the stress you get from fasting is the health benefit. Believe it or not, they call it hormesis stress, hormetic stress. It's the same as when you work out and you break down muscle, you're doing that for the betterment, to improve strength, but it creates a stress on the body, but it's a good stress. And that's what intermittent fasting can do, but only after I feel like a client has achieved a certain level of health working with me, and they have an understanding of what we're doing. So, and these are all lifestyle things. Aside from hiring a coach, it costs you nothing. There's no pills. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't find nutrient deficiencies and there's going to be supplements down the road, Doesn't have to be. You can achieve huge gains in your health with just following these guidelines. And I'm tapping a little bit each day into my 6 foundation health principles, nutrition being one of them. So tomorrow we're going to kind of tie this all, wrap it all up together with a nice neat little bow. And I will answer any more questions. If you have them, I'll take them, throw them at me. Otherwise, for now, have a great day and look for the replay a little bit later today. Have a good one.